The massive crystalline chamber stretched out like a frozen ocean, its walls pulsing with soft blue light that matched the heartbeats of 47 different species. Captain Jin Park had been to many diplomatic meetings, but this emergency session felt different. The air itself seemed thick with fear. Representatives from across the galaxy sat in their specially designed seats. The Valdorians, with their insect-like bodies, clicked nervously. The tall, gray Thamorians remained perfectly still, as they had for millions of years. Even the usually proud Centaurians kept their heads down, avoiding eye contact with the holographic displays floating in the center of the room. Those displays told a story that made Jin's stomach turn. 17 star systems, each containing billions of lives, had simply vanished from all communications in the past year. No distress signals, no final messages, nothing. Just empty space where thriving civilizations used to be. The Valdorian Prime Minister's translator buzzed as she spoke. Her real voice sounded like grinding metal, but the device made it sound almost human. The ancient laws are clear. We must follow the silence protocols. No investigation, no contact, no acknowledgement of what happens in the void sectors. Jin looked around the chamber. Every alien face showed the same expression, terror mixed with acceptance. They knew something he didn't, and whatever it was, it scared them more than death itself. "This doesn't make sense," Jin said, his voice echoing in the vast space. 17 civilizations don't just disappear. We have the technology to investigate safely. We could send unmanned probes, or no, the word exploded from dozens of translators at once. The Prime Minister's mandibles clicked rapidly. "You don't understand, human. Your species is too young, too reckless." Jin felt his temper rising. "Then help me understand. Why are you all so afraid to even look?" The chamber fell silent. Even the soft humming of the life support systems seemed to stop. Finally, the ancient Thamorian elder moved. His species had been traveling the stars when Earth was still covered in ice. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of countless ages. "Because, child of the death world, there are things in the darkness between stars that are older than your sun. For 60 million years. Every intelligent species has learned the same lesson. When the harvesters wake, the wise stay silent and hidden." The word harvesters hit the chamber like a physical blow. Several representatives actually flinched. Jin realized he had just learned the galaxy's greatest and most terrible secret. The bridge of the Defiance felt unusually quiet as Captain Hannah. You stared at the classified data scrolling across her personal screen. The information the Galactic Council had shared was incomplete, heavily redacted, but it painted a picture that made her blood run cold. These weren't random attacks or natural disasters. The harvesters moved with purpose, with intelligence, with a plan that had been unfolding for millions of years. Science Officer Minho sat at his workstation nearby, running calculations that no other species had dared to make. The young man's face grew paler with each new result. Around them, the bridge crew went about their duties, but Hannah could sense their tension. Word of what happened in the council chamber had spread quickly through the ship. "Show me the pattern again," Hannah said quietly. Minho's fingers danced across his console, and a three-dimensional map of the galaxy appeared in the air between them. Red dots marked the locations of civilizations that had vanished over the past million years. At first glance, it looked random, but as Minho adjusted the timeline, the truth became horrifyingly clear. The disappearances formed a spiral, starting from the outer rim and slowly working inward toward the galaxy's crowded core. But the spiral wasn't moving at a steady pace. It was getting faster. Much faster. "Captain?" Minho's voice cracked slightly. "I've checked the math 3 times. The acceleration pattern is consistent. At this rate, they'll reach the outer human colonies in 52 years. The inner worlds, including Earth, ... Double quotes. He paused, swallowing hard. maybe 30 years after that. Communications Officer Hyun looked up from her station. Captain, I'm monitoring alien channels. The other species are already preparing for what they call the long sleep. Some are shutting down their colonies. Others are moving deeper into uncharted space. Navigator Junho shook his head in disbelief. They're just running away. That's their plan. It's worked for 60 million years, Hannah replied, but her voice carried no conviction. She stood up and walked to the main view screen, staring out at the stars. But this time feels different. Minho nodded grimly. The pattern shows they're not just randomly hitting systems anymore. They're being systematic, thorough, like they're not planning to leave anything behind this time. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. Every other species in the galaxy was preparing to hide and wait, hoping the harvesters would eventually return to hibernation like they had before. But the math didn't support that hope. The data suggested something far worse. A final harvest. A complete sweep of all intelligent life in the galaxy. While alien civilizations whispered prayers and prepared for another cosmic game of hide and seek, Hannah realized what they all refused to see. This time, there would be nowhere left to run. The 3 human ships moved through space like ghosts, their engines running on minimal power to avoid detection. Captain Hannah, you watched the tactical display from the bridge of the Defiance as they crossed into the forbidden territory. Behind them, the resilience and determination followed in perfect formation, their crews knowing they were now criminals in the eyes of the Galactic Council. Any second thoughts? Asked Executive Officer Kyung, standing beside her captain's chair. Hannah shook her head. The councils had 60 million years to figure this out. All they've done is hide and pray. Time for a different approach. The void sectors looked exactly like their name suggested. Empty space where stars seemed dimmer and planets drifted silent and cold. As they approached the Zarian system, the crew fell into an uneasy quiet. Everyone knew this had been home to 14 billion Zaridians just 2 years ago. Now the system's communication arrays broadcasted nothing but static. Commander, take him, suited up for the surface mission, handpicking his team from volunteers. Nobody had to go down to Prime, but everyone wanted to. That was the human way. When faced with a mystery that scared everyone else in the galaxy, humans walked straight toward it. The shuttle landed in what used to be the capital city's main plaza. Through their helmet displays, the landing party could see towering spires and elegant bridges stretching between massive buildings. Everything looked perfect, as if the inhabitants had just stepped away for lunch and would be back any minute. But the silence was absolute. Lieutenant Suhan was the first to voice what they all felt. This is wrong. 14 billion people don't just vanish without leaving a trace. They split into teams and began exploring. The residential areas were the most disturbing beds made, meals half prepared, children's toys scattered on floors. But no bodies, no signs of struggle, no indication that anyone had even tried to run or hide. The breakthrough came when they found the museums. Every single cultural center, library, and archive had been expanded far beyond their original size. Massive crystalline structures had been built around them, preserving every piece of Zaridian art, literature, and scientific knowledge in perfect condition. Sue stood before a display case containing what looked like a child's drawing, now carefully mounted and labeled with symbols none of them could read. Her voice was barely a whisper as the horrible truth hit her. They're not destroyers. They don't want to wipe out civilizations. She turned to face Tae, her face pale behind her helmet's visor. They're collectors. They're preserving us. The alarm klaxons screamed across the bridge of the Defiance as something massive began materializing just outside Zarian Prime's orbit. Captain Hannah, you felt her heart skip as the sensors tried to make sense of what they were seeing. The ships that appeared weren't like anything in the galactic databases. They seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, flickering in and out of normal space like mirages. Captain, I'm reading 7, no, 12. The count keeps changing. Sensor operator Jiho called out, his voice tight with confusion. They're not fully in our reality. The harvester vessels were enormous, easily dwarfing the largest human battleships. Their hulls looked organic, like they had been grown rather than built. Strange patterns of light pulsed beneath their surfaces, and parts of them seemed to fade away, only to reappear moments later in slightly different positions. They're beautiful, whispered Navigator Junho, and Hannah realized he was right. The ships moved with an alien grace that was both mesmerizing and terrifying. All ships, maintain radio silence, Hannah ordered. Cut engines to minimum power. Her training told her to run, to get as far away as possible, before those things noticed them. Every instinct screamed that these ships were death itself made manifest. But as she watched the harvesters begin their work on the dead world below, Hannah made a decision that went against millions of years of galactic wisdom. Helm, match their course and speed. Stay at maximum sensor range, but I want us following those ships. The bridge crew stared at her. Communications Officer Heian spoke first, her voice barely steady. Captain, with respect, every species that's encountered these things has the same survival protocol: run and hide. And that's exactly why we don't understand them, Hannah replied. For 7 million years, everyone's been too scared to actually watch what they do. For the next 7 days, the 3 human ships became shadows, following the harvesters as they moved from system to system. The alien vessels worked with methodical precision, never hurrying, never showing any awareness that they were being observed. They processed each dead civilization the same way, scanning, cataloging, preserving. They have routines. Science Officer Minho observed on day 5. Like they're following some kind of protocol that's millions of years old. Hannah nodded, watching the pattern unfold on her screens. And routines can be predicted. Protocols can be interrupted. She paused, a dangerous smile crossing her face. Most importantly, they've never been hunted before. They don't know how to watch their backs. Captain Jin Park gripped the armrests of his command chair as something invaded his mind. It started as a whisper, then grew into a roar of pure despair that threatened to crush his soul. The bridge of the resilience seemed to darken around him, and suddenly he could see the futility of everything: his life, his species, the entire universe itself. The harvesters had finally noticed their human shadows. Captain Tactical Officer, Day cried out, but his voice sounded distant and hollow. Around the bridge, crew members staggered as waves of psychological assault hammered into their minds. The attack was designed to break their will, to make them understand that resistance was pointless, and death was the only certainty. Jin felt the crushing weight of cosmic insignificance pressing down on him. Images flashed through his mind: Earth burning, his family screaming, humanity's brief existence snuffed out like a candle in a hurricane. The certainty of failure, of meaningless death, tried to overwhelm every thought, but something deep inside him pushed back. Growing up on Earth meant learning to live with constant danger. Hurricanes that could level cities, earthquakes that split the ground, predators that hunted in the dark. Every human child learned the same lesson: when something tries to kill you, you don't lie down and accept it. You fight back harder. Status report, Jin growled, his voice stronger than it should have been under such assault. Titha other ships, stammered Navigator Yang, blood trickling from her nose as she fought the mental invasion. Defiance and determination are holding formation. Whatever they're doing to us, it's not working like it should. Through the psychological storm, Jin could see his crew rallying. Weapons Officer Esiok was already at his station, fingers dancing over the targeting controls even as tears streamed down his face from the mental pressure. Engineer Ray reported from below decks that all systems were operational, her voice steady, despite the terror the harvesters were broadcasting directly into her brain. This was the moment every other species had failed. For 60 million years, civilizations had encountered this same psychological weapon and simply collapsed, accepting their fate as prey. But humans had evolved on a world where everything tried to kill them, where survival meant never giving up, even when defeat seemed certain. All ships, weapons hot, Jin ordered, his voice cutting through the despair like a blade. Show these things what Deathworlders do when something tries to kill us. The human fleet opened fire with everything they had: missiles, energy beams, kinetic projectiles. For the first time in their ancient existence, the harvesters experienced something completely alien to them, prey that became more dangerous when cornered. The news hit the galactic communication networks like a shockwave. For the first time in recorded history, harvester ships had been destroyed, not damaged, not delayed, completely annihilated by weapons fire from 3 small human vessels. The footage was grainy and incomplete, but it showed something that every species had believed impossible: the ancient predators burning in the vacuum of space. On Valdoria Prime, emergency sirens wailed as the insectoid government went into full crisis mode. Prime Minister Clark's broadcast on all emergency frequencies, her translator crackling with panic. The humans have broken the ancient compact. They've attacked the harvesters directly. We're all dead because of their recklessness. Similar scenes played out across dozens of worlds. The Zentarian High Council immediately began broadcasting surrender signals toward the void sectors. The peaceful Aquarians started evacuating their ocean worlds, convinced that the harvesters would now consume everything in their path. Ancient species that had survived by hiding for millions of years saw their carefully maintained peace shattered by 3 human ships, but the most shocking betrayal came from species humanity had considered allies. The Thamorians, oldest members of the Confederacy, transmitted Earth's exact coordinates to the void sectors, along with detailed information about human colonies. The Valdorians followed suit, broadcasting everything they knew about human military capabilities and weaknesses. Commander Yoon Lee sat in the communication center of the Determination, watching the flood of transmissions with growing disgust. His translation software could barely keep up with the dozens of species offering to sacrifice humanity in exchange for a return to the old system of periodic, manageable harvests. Captain Hannah Yoon called over the ship's intercom. "They're selling us out. Half the Confederacy is broadcasting our location to the enemy." But instead of despair, Yoon felt something else rising in his chest. The same stubborn anger that had driven humanity to the stars in the first place. He opened a channel to every communication network in the galaxy, knowing his words would be heard on 1,000 worlds. "This is Commander Yoon Lee, of the human vessel Determination, addressing all members of the Galactic Confederacy." His voice was calm, steady, carrying the weight of absolute conviction. "You're panicking because we fought back. You're betraying us because you think that will save you. But you're wrong about one thing." He paused, looking out at the stars where harvester ships were already turning toward human space. "They were already coming for all of us. We just chose to fight, instead of hiding in our holes, waiting to die." The salvaged navigation data from the destroyed harvester ships led the human fleet on a journey that took them beyond everything they thought they knew about the universe. Captain Sue Park watched her long-range sensors as they approached the galaxy's edge, where space should have been empty and cold. Instead, what they found defied every law of physics she had ever learned. Massive structures floated in the void between galaxies, each one larger than entire solar systems. They weren't built from metal or stone. They seemed to be constructed from crystallized space itself, bending reality around them in ways that made her head hurt just looking at them. The structures pulsed with ancient energy, connected by streams of light that stretched across impossible distances. "Captain," Science Officer Dong Wu called from his station, his voice shaking. "I'm reading life signs from those constructs. Not just life, intelligence. Something's been living out there for..." He paused, checking his readings again. longer than our galaxy has existed. The data cores they had ripped from the harvester. Rex began to make terrible sense as they got closer. Sue watched the translation software slowly piece together information that no species had ever seen before. What it revealed made her stomach turn. The galaxy wasn't a natural occurrence. It was a garden. For billions of years, entities calling themselves the Archivists had been carefully tending stellar formation, guiding the evolution of planets, nudging primitive species toward intelligence. They allowed civilizations to grow and develop until they became interesting enough to preserve. Then they sent their harvesters to collect the best specimens before starting the cycle over again. Every great work of art, every scientific breakthrough, every cultural achievement in galactic history had happened because these ancient beings allowed it to happen. The Thamorians hadn't naturally evolved their wisdom, they had been guided. The Valdorians' complex society wasn't their own creation, it was cultivated. Even humanity's stubborn independence might have been encouraged because the Archivists found it amusing. Communications officer Yunji looked up from her console with horror in her eyes. Captain, I'm detecting similar garden structures around other galaxies. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They single quotes, They're farming the entire universe. The worst part was realizing that every species in their galaxy was essentially livestock. The Archivists didn't see them as equals, or even enemies. They were just interesting pets who had gotten a little too smart for their own good. Sue stared out at the ancient structures, feeling smaller than she had ever felt in her life. We're not fighting an invasion, she whispered. We're fighting our landlords. The space around the 3 human ships suddenly twisted, reality bending like heated metal, as something unimaginably ancient forced itself into normal existence. Captain Jin Park felt his mind reeling as the bridge of the resilience seemed to stretch and contract around him. The very atoms in the air vibrated with power that predated the formation of stars. Then they appeared. The Archivists weren't ships or machines. They were pure consciousness given form. Beings of living thought that had witnessed the birth and death of countless galaxies. Their presence pressed against Jin's mind like the weight of an ocean, threatening to crush his sanity with the sheer scope of their existence. When they spoke, it wasn't through sound or radio waves. Their words formed directly inside every human brain, carrying the accumulated wisdom and weariness of billions of years. Children of the young world, you struggle against forces you cannot comprehend. Your defiance is noted, but ultimately meaningless. We have seen this pattern countless times before. Around the bridge, Jin's crew fought to stay conscious under the mental pressure. Navigator Yang gripped her console so tightly her knuckles went white. Weapons Officer Siak's hands shook as he tried to maintain targeting locks on beings that existed partially outside of space and time. We do not wish to destroy you. Your species shows promise, your aggression, your refusal to submit. These are qualities we find, interesting. Serve willingly, and your people will be preserved in our eternal archives. Some of you may even be allowed to continue existing, in a form of perpetual happiness. The offer hung in the air like poison. Jin could feel the weight of every choice that had led to this moment. Every human who had ever refused to bow down. Every ancestor who had looked at impossible odds and charged forward anyway. He looked around his bridge at faces he knew better than his own family. Captain Hannah stood at the weapons station, her jaw set in determination, despite the tears streaming down her cheeks from the mental assault. Science Officer Minho was still calculating firing solutions, his hands steady, even as reality warped. Around them, every person on that bridge looked back at him with the same expression. Fear, yes, but also defiance. This is the bargain all civilizations eventually accept, submit, and live forever in our care. This is wisdom. Jin stood up slowly, every movement feeling like he was pushing against the weight of eternity itself. When he spoke, His voice was steady and clear. "Counter-proposal," he said aloud. "Go to hell." The human fleet opened fire on gods. The 3 human ships burned like stars against the cosmic darkness, their hulls splitting apart under the reality-warping assault of beings older than time itself. But even as the defiance, resilience, and determination died, their crews fought to the very end, transmitting everything they had learned in one final, desperate broadcast. Captain Jin's last words echoed across the galaxy as his ship's hull cracked open to the vacuum. "This is what we learned. This is how you fight gods." The transmission contained years of gathered data, frequencies that disrupted archivist technology, geometric patterns that could break their reality manipulation, weaknesses that no one had ever thought to look for, because no one had ever dared to study them while fighting back. On Thamorian Prime, the ancient elder felt the human data stream reach his consciousness. For 60 million years, he had counseled patience, silence, survival through hiding. His species had weapons capable of cracking planets, but they had been sealed away since the first harvester contact eons ago, now with trembling appendages that hadn't moved in millennia. He began activating systems that predated most galactic civilizations. "Forgive me, ancestors," the elder whispered as massive weapon platforms began rising from beneath his world's surface. "We should have fought long ago." Across the galaxy, the pattern repeated. On Valdoria Prime, the insectoid fleet that had hidden in deep space for generations received new orders. The peaceful Aquarians emerged from their ocean depths with bioships that could survive in any environment. Even the merchant species who had never fired a shot in anger began retrofitting their trading vessels with whatever weapons they could find. The change wasn't just military, it was spiritual. Species that had spent millions of years telling themselves that submission was wisdom finally remembered what it felt like to be free. The human sacrifice had shown them something they had forgotten. Sometimes the choice between death and slavery wasn't really a choice at all. Communication channels that had carried only whispers of fear for eons suddenly blazed with coordination, signals, fleet movements, tactical data, shared intelligence about archivist positions. The galaxy was waking up from its longest nightmare. For the Deathworlders who showed us the way, the Thamorian Elder broadcast as his ancient weapons fired for the first time in 60 million years, in the darkness between galaxies. The archivists felt something they had not experienced since, before the first stars formed uncertainty. Their perfect garden was in rebellion, and for the first time in their eternal existence, they didn't know what would happen next. The universe had chosen silence for billions of years, but the children of the Death World had chosen action, and now the galaxy followed their lead into an impossible war for freedom.